Welcome to the Explainer. So, today we're going to talk about something kind of wild, the story of the Pig War. And yeah, you heard that right. It's this bizarre, totally true story about how the US and the British Empire almost went to war, all because of one pig. So, the big question is, right? How on earth, in 1859, does the death of a single farm animal bring two global superpowers to the brink of all-out war? Well, it's this crazy mix of vague treaties, hot-headed commanders, and yeah, one very, very unlucky pig. And it all starts on this small but super important island called San Juan, right there in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's late summer, 1859. On this little island, you've got a small American garrison dug in, basically staring down the barrels of the British Royal Navy's cannons. I mean, the tension was just incredibly thick. One American engineer who was there actually wrote that everyone was afraid a collision was about to happen. And get this, the American commander on the ground, a captain named George E. Pickett, he knew just how bad it was. He said, "They have a force so much superior to mine that it will be merely a mouthful to them." And he wasn't kidding. We're talking 5 powerful British warships, one of them a massive 31-gun steam frigate with all their cannons pointed right at his tiny camp. And Pickett, well, let's just say he had a history of making dramatic and not always smart decisions. He put his men in a really, really bad spot. So all told, the Americans eventually had about 500 soldiers on the island. But, they were up against more than 1,000 British sailors and Marines. Some people even thought the British could land up to 2,000 men if they wanted to. I mean, the Americans were just completely outgunned, totally outnumbered, staring right into the face of one of the planet's most powerful navies.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, how in the world did we get here? A massive military standoff? What started it all? Well, if we rewind a few months, it all began with something that sounds almost silly. A tiny incident that just happened to light the fuse on this huge international powder keg.
It was June 15th, 1859. An American farmer, a guy named Lyman Cutler, shoots and kills a pig. Now, this wasn't just any pig. It was a big black boar, and it belonged to someone working for Britain's Hudson's Bay Company, which, for all intents and purposes, was the government around there. And look, this pig had a bad habit. It kept getting into Cutler's garden and eating his potatoes. On this particular day, Cutler just snapped. And here's where the real trouble starts. Cutler actually felt bad about it, so he went to the owner, a guy named Charles Griffin, and offered him $10. Now, back then, $10 was a pretty good chunk of change, probably more than the pig was even worth. But Griffin, he absolutely lost it. He claimed it was some valuable breeding boar and demanded $100, which for a farmer like Cutler was just an insane amount of money. So obviously, Cutler said no way. And the argument just got bigger. The story goes that when Cutler said, "Hey, your pig was eating my potatoes," Griffin shot back with, "Well, you should keep your potatoes out of my pig." I mean, classic. So with nobody backing down, the British authorities, the Hudson's Bay Company, threatened to arrest Cutler. And just like that, this little fight over a pig wasn't about a pig anymore. It was about who was in charge. So what did the American settlers do? They called for the U.S. military. But here's the thing, and this is so important. This was never really about a pig. The pig was just the spark that lit the fuse. The real fuel for this fire had been piling up for years. It was all about a super vague and, frankly, dangerous border dispute between two giant, growing empires. I mean, this had been brewing for decades. See, back in 1818, the US and Britain agreed to just kinda share the Oregon country. Then, in 1846, the Oregon Treaty was supposed to fix it, setting the border at the 49th parallel. But, and this is a huge but, when the border got to the water around the San Juan Islands, the treaty just said it should follow the main channel. The problem? It never said which main channel. Was it the Haro Strait, which the Americans wanted, or the Rosario Strait, which the British wanted? So for years, the ownership of these islands was just up in the air. An International Boundary Commission tried to fix it in 1856, but they got nowhere. And let me tell you, these islands mattered. A lot. One British captain even wrote that losing them could be fatal to their territory. Why? Because whoever controlled the islands controlled the shipping lanes. It was a massive strategic advantage. For the British, it was about defense. For the Americans, who were all fired up about this idea of manifest destiny, that it was their God-given right to expand, it was about national pride. And to make things even worse, a gold rush in 1858 brought thousands of rowdy American prospectors into the area, which just made the British even more nervous.
All right, so you've got a dead pig and a fuzzy border. That's bad enough. But what really poured gasoline on this fire were the specific people in charge. Some really aggressive, ambitious guys on both sides who were ready to turn a small squabble into a full-blown international crisis. So when the American settlers asked for help, their request ended up with this guy, Brigadier General William S. Harney. And believe me, he was the absolute last person you'd want handling a delicate situation like this. The man was a notorious hothead. He hated the British, and he had a reputation for being incredibly reckless and violent. I mean, just look at this guy's track record. He was openly anti-British, had a hair-trigger temper, and was known for his brutality. He'd even brutally slaughtered Oseti-Sakoan or Sioux people in a previous battle. On top of all that, he'd been court-martialed 4 times, once for being insubordinate to General Winfield Scott, a name you'll want to remember. So for Harney, this plea for help wasn't a problem to solve peacefully. Oh no, it was a golden opportunity. He saw a chance for glory, and without thinking twice, he sent in the troops. And who did he send? None other than Captain George E. Pickett. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. This is the exact same George Pickett who would go on to lead the disastrous Pickett's Charge at Gettysburg. So you can see this San Juan incident as a little preview of his personality. Super bold, aggressive, and maybe not the best at judging a situation. He landed on the island with 66 guys and just declared it American territory. Well, as you can imagine, this did not go over well with the British. Their guy in charge, Governor James Douglas, was furious. Douglas was a smart, ruthless leader, and he did not trust the Americans one bit. He called them lawless intruders. He was basically just looking for a reason to fight and show them who was boss. So he immediately called in the Royal Navy. And that's how we get to the standoff. You've got hundreds of American soldiers hunkered down, and just offshore, thousands of British soldiers and Marines with their guns pointed right at them. And get this, it took a whole month for the news of this ticking time bomb to even reach Washington, D.C. But when it finally did, you better believe the government scrambled to get some sane people out there. President Buchanan and his cabinet were, to put it mildly, freaking out. Tensions over slavery between the North and South were already about to boil over. The absolute last thing they needed was a war with Great Britain. So they sent their top guy, Lieutenant General Winfield Scott. This guy was 73 years old, a decorated hero of 2 wars, and they called him the Great Pacificator. His job was simple: go out there and clean up the mess that General Harney had made. Now, luckily for everyone, the British also had a voice of reason. It came from this man, Rear Admiral Robert Lambert Baines. He was the top naval officer there. People described him as well-controlled, a total professional. He was a veteran of the Battle of New Orleans. He knew what was at stake, and he was the perfect person to balance out the hot-headed Governor Douglas. And this is where things really turn a corner. The fiery Governor Douglas ordered Baines to land his Marines and attack the Americans, and the admiral just refused. He flat out said no. He's famously quoted as saying he would not involve 2 great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. He saw how completely absurd and dangerous the whole thing was, and that one single act of defiance probably stopped a war. For that, he was later knighted by the Queen, which tells you everything. So, with Admiral Baines holding the line against escalation, General Scott was finally able to sit down and work things out with Governor Douglas. They came to a compromise. Both sides would pull back their huge forces, and they'd agree to a joint military occupation of the island. The deal was simple. Each side would keep a small group, 100 men or less, until the politicians could finally settle the border dispute once and for all. And what happened next is probably my favorite part of this whole story. It's actually amazing. After coming literally to the brink of war, the American and British soldiers on the island became friends, like really good friends. For the next 12 years, they lived peacefully side by side. They had dinners together, they celebrated the 4th of July and the Queen's birthday together. They even built a road between their camps so they could visit each other more easily and hold joint horse races. And in a twist that is just too perfect, at one of those races, the winning horse was owned by Charles Griffin. Yep, the guy who owned the pig in the first place. So the military standoff was over, which was great, but the big problem, the border itself, was still just sitting there, unresolved. The final chapter of this whole pig war saga wouldn't be decided on a battlefield, but in a meeting room, with the final call being made by one of the most powerful men in Europe. So fast forward to 1871. In the Treaty of Washington, the U.S. and Britain finally agree to let someone else settle this thing for them through international arbitration. And who did they pick as the impartial judge? None other than German Kaiser Wilhelm I. Germany was the new big power in Europe, so he seemed like a good choice. Both sides gathered up all their maps and documents and made their case for why the border should go through either the Haro or the Rosario Strait. The Kaiser's commission heard all the arguments and prepared to make a final ruling in 1872. And the final decision was actually pretty straightforward. The Kaiser's commission decided that the main channel, the original treaty talked about, should be, well, the main channel, the one that was deeper and better for ships, and that was the Haro Strait. So, with that simple, logical ruling, the entire San Juan Island chain was awarded to the United States, and just like that, the dispute was officially over. And maybe the most amazing fact in this whole story is this. In this entire 12-year standoff, with thousands of soldiers, massive warships, and two global superpowers staring each other down, the only casualty was the pig. That's it. A potentially horrible war was avoided, not because of politicians thousands of miles away, but because of professional, cool-headed officers on the ground, guys like Admiral Baines and General Scott, who put peace above their own ambition. You know, a war was avoided back in 1859, but it really makes you think, doesn't it? How often do today's global conflicts begin with their own little squabble about a pig? It's just a powerful reminder that even the tiniest disputes can spiral out of control when you've got impulsive people in charge. And sometimes calm professional judgment is the only thing standing between a small problem and a total catastrophe.